A good cook in the bush was somebody who could make a damper with their right hand, carve some lamb or mutton with their left hand, and do the washing up with their feet all at once. That was a good cook. Okay, but they worked hard, these shearers. I've had stories of some of the old timers saying that after a day's shearing, they have actually crawled on all fours back to the shearing hut and collapsed. It was the same in New Zealand. They were paid per sheep they shore. And it was hard work with the blade shears, not the electric ones, but the blade shears. The electric ones, when they came, were pretty hard too. But these men had to sort of really get down on these sheep. And we had big sheep in Australia and New Zealand, and they kicked too. And so these men were riddled with lumbago, rheumatism, arthritis, and they always looking for cures, and like they wanted something to keep them going. And there's a wonderful song that talks about the way that these shearers worked, but this was the cure. See that? That's a goanna. And they extracted oil from it, which they called goanna oil. It was a hot rub, a liniment rub, and very popular. I actually did a bit of droving when I was a kid, and usually sheep and cows, but the hardest job I ever had was taking 2,000 goannas down from Brisbane to the goanna oil factory in Victoria. And because they kept running up the trees. And I asked an old bloke that was around the sheds, I said, hey, what do you do to stop them? He said, there's only one way that you can stop them. He said, you've got to go to the supermarket and you buy 4 tins of sardines for every goanna. And you know they've got a little ring on the thing to pull them. He said, you tie a tin of sardines to each of their legs. And he said, they won't go up the trees. It worked, and it was fine going over the grass, but I tell you, when we hit the bitumen, you could have heard them from Auckland. They made such a racket. Okay, I was going to sing you this song. There's a couple of references in it. A gun shearer was the fastest shearer, or the ringer of the shed, the quickest shearer in the shed, obviously made more money. As you got older, you got slower, so you couldn't keep up. So you either became the cook, or you one of the has-beens. Used to be able to shear good, but now one of the has-beens. So you can understand that this sort of song would be the sort of song the shearers would relate to when they're laying in their beds and they're thinking, you know, what are they doing with their lives? And somebody sings this song. I'm one of the has-beens, a shearer I mean. I once was the ringer, and I used to shear clean. I could make the wool roll off like the soil from the plough. But you may not believe me, I can't do it now. I'm as awkward as a new chum, and I'm used to the frown that the boss, he often shows me, saying, keep them blades down. I've shorn with Jack Hogan, Bill Wright and Jack Dunn, Charlie Fergus, Tommy Layton and the great Roaring Dunn. They bought from the Lachlan the best they could find, but none of those shearers could leave me behind. But I'm as awkward as a new chum, and I'm used to the frown that the boss, he often shows me, saying, keep them blades down. But it's no use complaining, I'll never say die. Though the days of hard shearing, for me they've gone by. I'll take the wool nice and easy, shear slowly but clean. And I have just told you what I have been. Okay, the drovers, well, these are the men that carried massive herds of cattle from one end of Australia to the other. They also did it in New Zealand. they were responsible for enormous numbers of cattle, cows. Some of them were cranky. At night, you had to reassure them that you were there so they didn't get spooked out in Australia by a dingo and do a bit of a stampede. So the shearers, the drovers, used to sit on their horses and they'd ride around the herd and they'd sing little ditties, or they'd play little instruments. In fact, I think I've got one here. Yeah, I have. They'd play a little sort of jaw harp, something like this. Or a tin whistle. Or they'd sing something like, a little ditty. Or one of the things they used was to remind them of the various brands, cattle brands, that they burnt into the hides of the cattle, because the herds used to meet at a waterhole, and they needed to separate them. So they'd make up little rhymes using the brands. So they'd say something like, oh, the northern brand is NT1. NT1 is the northern brand. Oh, the northern brand is NT1. NT1 is the northern brand. Oh, the Gillicuddy brand is GGG. GGG is the Gillicuddy brand. Oh, the Gillicuddy brand is GGG. And so on, and they'd say, oh, the farmer chased his wife with a broom, chased his wife with a broom, oh, the farmer chased the wife with a broom, chased his wife with a broom, and so forth. So, and they sang songs about their own work. So here's one from the Drovers. This is a love song. It mentions food. It's a shearer and his girlfriend, and the girl's saying she'd like to go and join him as he goes away, droving the sheep, and she could cook his meals for him, wash his duds or his trousers and so forth. And it's called the banks of the Condor Mine. The Condor Mine's a river up in Queensland. Oh, hark, the dogs, they're barking, love, I can no longer stay. The men are all down mustering, and it is nearly day. And I must be off in the morning, love, before the sun does rise, to join the Queensland shearers on the banks of the Condor Mine. Oh, Willie, dearest Willie, let me go along with you. Oh, I'll cut off my auburn fringe, I'll be a shearer too. I'll learn to count your tally, love, as ringer o' your shine, and I'll wash your greasy moleskins on the banks of the Condor Mine. Oh, Nancy, dearest Nancy, with me you cannot go. Oh, the boss has given his orders, love, no woman may do so. For your delicate constitution, it's unequal unto mine, to withstand the constant tigering on the banks of the Condor Mine. Oh, Willie, dearest Willie, then stay at home with me. Oh, we'll take up a selection, love, and a farmer's wife I'll be. I'll learn to husk the corn, my love, I'll cook you meals so fine, you'll forget the ram stag mutton on the banks of the Condor Mine. Oh, Nancy, dearest Nancy, pray do not hold me back. The men are all down waiting, the men are on the track. So here's a goodbye kiss, my love, till you I do incline, when we've shorn the last of those jumbucks on the banks of the Condor Mine. Just a little plug here. The shop still has a few records and CDs, not records, CDs up there, and some of my books, including the Bush Yarn book, which has been popular, and they'll be gone. They're open tonight and they're open tomorrow night, and then they'll be gone. Okay, here's a station cook. There he is, cranky things. They used to have lots of little ditties about the station cooks, like the song I'm going to sing to you, it won't detain you long. It's all about a station cook we had at Old Ping Yong. His cooking was so beautiful, his cooking was so fine, it gave us all a guts ache right through the shearing time. Oh, you should taste his plum duffs, his doughboys and his pies. I swear by Long Maloney, they'd open a shearer's eyes. He'd say, take your time, good fellows, and he'd fix you with a glance. So I'll dish you up much better, lads, if you give me half a chance. But oh dear, I feel so queer, I don't know what to do. The thought of leaving Fowler's Day, it breaks me heart in two. But if ever I get that slushy, I'll make him rue the day. He ruined me constitution when I was shearing at Fowler's Bay. Okay, swagmen. They travelled, they carried everything. They weren't so jolly either, but they carried everything on their back. There was a way to carry these swags so you didn't get a backache. They don't look too comfortable, but they weighed them. In their little dilly bags and so forth, they carried flour, tea, meat and sugar, and it was quite common during the 1890s when we had thousands of people, swagmen, swag women, going around Australia. They had to keep moving to get a dole, a sustenance payment, and it was quite common for them to go to a farm and get some rations. So it's the sort of thing that was understood that you helped your fellow man. Today they'd probably shoot you if you go near it. But in those days, you could go up to the back gate, make sure you shut all the gates as you go through. And I heard about one bloke, he goes up, and his particular way of getting extra rations was to try and embarrass the station owner to give him more rations. And he knocked on the back door, and he had his hand behind his back. And the lady opened it and she said, yes. And as he said, morning, ma'am. And as he said it, he brought round from behind his back a dried up cow turd. A cow, meadow cake we call them in Australia, cow dung. And he said, can you spare some margarine, missus? And she looked at this thing in his hand and she got it and she flung it over the fence. She said, you poor old swagman. She said, you go round the front of the house. There's some fresh ones round there. The old swaggies, they really had to carry and do everything